Welcome back. And today we will be able to start working together to write our very first MassQL query. So you'll learn a little bit about the syntax and some of the tools to try these things out. And so I want to start off with a very simple example that can motivate the type of query that we're starting to write. And so this particular molecule has a sugar on the side, so it's hexose on the side. And in case we want to start looking for sugars, we want to think about what is the intrinsic pattern in the mass spec data, in the tandem mass spec data, that is indicative of sugars. And so it happens to be, generally the sugar falls off first, and there's 162 Dalton neutral loss from the precursor that is pretty common in a lot of glycan-containing tandem mass spectra. And so once we know that information, let's start encoding it in MassQL. And so MassQL is just, you can write these queries as kind of pseudo sentences. And so we want to query for MS2 data where the MS2 neutral loss is equal to 162. And so it's pretty straightforward here. The MS2 NL has a particular meaning in MassQL. And so now that we got that, that'll find all MS2 spectra that have a neutral loss peak of 162 from the precursor. However, we might want to start qualifying that a little bit more. And so first we have this MS2 neutral loss, which is called a condition. And we can add qualifiers to this that say, well, it can't just be any peak. It has to be, in this particular example, has to have a minimum precursor or minimum intensity of 10% relative to the base peak. And it has to be within 5 ppm of the accurate mass that we kind of put here. And so we can start adding multiple of these different qualifiers to kind of constrain and find exactly what we were looking for. And then next, to get a better representation of what we're talking about in the query, to translate it back into human, especially to communicate to others, we're able to take this query that we wrote above and translate it back to English. So we can see, for example, in blue, the scaninfo MS2 data means we're going to return the scan information of the MS2 data. And then in the red, we're looking for, again, the neutral loss peak from precursor of 162 mOZ with a minimum intensity relative to the base peak of 10% and a 5 ppm mOZ tolerance. And then we can also translate this into other languages other than English to reach a broader audience. And so now that we've written our very first query, let's go try it out on real data. Let's see how it, can we validate that it's doing the right thing. And so one of the tools that we created is called the MassQL Sandbox. And so this can be found at msql.ucsd.edu. And if you go there, one of the things you can start doing is you can start workshopping your queries against spectral libraries where we know the actual compound. So it'll give us confidence we're finding what we're supposed to find. And so if we go there and we look, there's a little box in the top left-hand corner. It's called Query Sandbox. We paste the query that we're looking for in there. And so what it'll do once we paste it in there is you'll show up a little representation, visualization. Not super interesting for a single neutral loss, but it's way more fun once you have real data and you kind of can overlay these things. The next thing we're going to do is in this file name portion, we're going to do the drop down to GMPS-library. And so this is a bunch of known spectral library MSMS that we can query against. And in this data exploration section to the right here, this is actually the result of querying that GMPS library with this neutral loss of 162 Daltons. And so what we can start looking here is all these library entries. There happens to be 8 pages, so about 80 up to 80 hits, and we can see that we also list out the compound names of the spectral library entries. And one of the things that we can identify here is that a lot of these compounds have the name hexoside in there, which indicates to us that these are glycan or hexose containing compounds. We can also see, we can Google all these other compounds and look at their structures, and they actually have a hexose in there as well. And so that gives us a lot of confidence that what we're looking for with this MassQL query, looking for this 162 Dalton neutral loss, it's finding what we initially aimed to do, and it's those hexose containing compounds. So it seems to do it pretty successfully, or reasonably successfully, in this kind of sandbox. And so what we can also do in the next in the next tutorial video is how can we start taking these queries and applying it to your own data against one file, 10 files, 100 files, thousands of files. And so that'll be pretty exciting as well. So stay tuned for that.